really committed to keeping this down to 1 hour. So to set the tone, I think we do have quite a few questions to cover. And in order to do that, we're going to have to stay really true to our time. So to that end, if you've got questions throughout the presentation today, would you please just type them into the chat, and Dave and I and your managers are going to monitor this. And if there's something just super relevant that we need to hit right at the moment, we'll try to squeeze it in. But we will get to all of the questions at the end of the event, so that we may go a few minutes over to cover all the questions at the end, but we do want to cover quite a few real key issues. And so let's get started with this. First of all, big thank you to everybody for showing up. We've got well over 82 people now, so this is exciting. Thank you all for being a part of this. This is going to be a very timely and relevant subject, and we really appreciate Dave Medina with Fairway Mortgage Corporation to really continue to partner with us and be a friend and one of our strongest allies in the Valley here in what we do. And Dave, we appreciate all that you do on a daily basis for us, but even more so right now with this special event, pulling this together and helping us really cover some of the questions that we all have about the appraisal process. So I'm not going to talk anymore. Dave, thank you for being here. Please say hello and introduce our guest speaker this morning.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. Just to kind of set the tone, I really miss you guys a lot. And, seeing Jennifer and Shannon and Carol and Joe and all of you guys, it's really cool. And it really, I think, helps with perspective right now, right? We have so much to look forward to in 2021 as we step back into what I hope is a new normal. And I'm just really itching to get back out there and connect with you guys. Many of you guys know that we recently relocated the team down to Old Town Temecula. We've got a very, very cool space down here that's going to be great for trainings and entertaining and all sorts of fun goodies we have planned for all of you guys. We've just, I've got my finger over the button and we just haven't been able to push it so far. So, but I thank you, Joe, for constantly reaching out to me for these kinds of things. This is extremely relevant, what we're going to be talking about today. In fact, it is probably the most relevant as we are here discussing purchase lending today and the effect that our appraised values are having in this, market that is quite literally on fire. And unfortunately in California, on fire for real. So, but to thank you, Joe, and to the management team, but just for some housekeeping things again, I've asked Joe because we wanted to use this time to be very meaningful. And we have sort of some buckets of discussion that we're going to be talking about that I think are going to cover the most important aspects of the appraisal relationship to me and to you guys out there. But certainly this is a very unique opportunity. I mean, right now, getting time from an appraiser, especially like the one that I'm going to be introducing here in just a minute, like we didn't bring in the bench folks, we brought in the starter here. And it's very cool, but I mean, get in a couple of hours of this individual's time here. I mean, this is like winning the lottery. So we need to take advantage of it. They're extremely busy right now. Mortgage is in one of the most prolific eras it's ever been in right now. We have interest rates starting with a big old number 2 out there. And, because of that fact, we're absolutely inundated and slammed and in all aspects of mortgage. So, we want to treat this time well. I will be monitoring as best I can the chat box here as I moderate this question and answer period. But for you managers as well, we'll open up some time at the end to do some just general Q&A in case I missed anything or in case our discussion inspires any more wonderful questions towards the end. So, no more about me except just a big thanks for being here. I'd like to immediately move into introducing my special guest today. So, long gone are the days that Dave Medina can pick up the phone and call my appraiser who's in my, I'm sorry guys, hold on half a second, okay? Sorry about that. You know, long gone are the days where we are able to just pick up the phone and call an appraiser and say, hey, Susie appraiser, please jump out to 123 Smith Street and bring this in at 400,000. That is in the dark ages of lending, and we are well past that. That was prior to the big 2008 housing correction. So the way that we operate with appraisers today is through an appraisal management company. Think of it, if you will, as like a taxi dispatch center, right? So when you call a taxi place, you're not calling the taxi driver, you're calling sort of a hub, and then they in turn will find the appraiser or the taxi that is closest to you to pick you up and try to coordinate that, and then they will send somebody out to come and grab you. Much like Lyft and Uber and all these other things that we're using today. The appraisal process is very similar. So we have to submit every appraisal order through an AMC or an appraisal management company. And then that appraisal management company assigns that to the appraiser. That's designed to do a couple things. Number one, make sure that the appraiser doesn't have any undue influence from guys like me who say, hey, I'm not going to send you orders anymore unless you bring this property in. That's some dialogue that used to happen, believe it or not, back in the day, in a very bad time of my business. And then also it's to, you know, help us with coordinating, you know, the right appraisers for the right specialized areas. You know, having appraisers come from out of area is sometimes a big issue in our business. I'm very blessed here at Fairway that the AMC company that we use is actually Fairway owned. We actually created and built our own AMC company. And we serve a few other lenders out there in that process, but you bet 95% of the business that our AMC is working on is Fairway business. And so very uniquely, we are able to build a panel that suits our area specifically, which I would consider to be, you know, South End Riverside County, Temecula Valley area, and, you know, circa our area here. So the appraiser that I asked to join us today, her name is Carleen Pauls. And Carleen has, she is certainly part of my appraisal panel here locally in our area. In fact, she is on the top of that list. So like I mentioned before, we're not talking about a bench player. She's literally the starter. And she is an amazing appraiser. She's been appraising since January of 1993, and she carries a certified residential appraisal credential. So she's able to go out there and do the tough stuff for us, which is good. And very sort of applicable to you guys here. Prior to being an appraiser, she was a realtor for 5 years. So I think she has that sort of unique perspective of having walked the walk like you guys walk every single day, which is always a good thing. But she lives here in the Southern Riverside County area, and she has always specialized in her career, both in real estate and as an appraiser in our local area. So she is a backyard player here. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce Carleen Pauls to our discussion today. Carleen, you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
All right, I gotta find you. Yeah, hold on, let me. Oh, there you are. Hi, Carleen.
Hi.
Okay. So again, Carleen, thank you for your time today. So we're just gonna, in the interest of time, sort of just launch into this. If you'd like to deviate a little bit, please feel, you know, sort of take creative reins and go where you want with this discussion. But I think where we'll open up is to talk a little bit more about sort of the overall role of the appraiser. You know, I think that there is this perception out there that, you know, the customer's paying for the appraisal is theirs. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's really for us, right, as the lender. because, you know, regardless of the transaction, they may be putting back down 3%, 5%, 10%, 20%, or any other number. But that means we're putting down the 97%, the 95%, the 90%, or the 80% of the value of the house. So it's super important that we as lenders are aligned with people like you to go out there and sort of validate the collateral that we're lending on. But why is it important when we're ordering appraisals that we equip you guys with the purchase offer? I get that question a lot from agents. Like, why do we have to send that purchase contract to the appraiser? Isn't this supposed to be like a blind independent valuation?
Well, it is an independent valuation from the purchase contract. However, the purchase contract holds a lot of information regarding that sale. It lists the terms of the sale regarding the purchase price, any concessions that are paid. Perhaps there's repairs that are going to be completed at the seller's expense that are included in that price, personal property. So all that stuff plays a part in the valuation because some of the stuff is adjusted in and perhaps taken out. If somebody includes a tractor in a sale, we're not going to give that value. So if the price is $700,000 and it's including a $30,000 tractor, well, we need to know that. And the lender needs to know that because just like you said, the lender is the one who holds this appraisal in their hand. And at the end of the day, they're the ones on the line for the money. So that's
yes,
the reason why we need to see it.
Okay. So let's expand a little bit more about that. Let's try and identify maybe some of the things that go on the contract that can have a bearing on value. So we talked about number one, you talked about a tractor, right? But are there other sort of types of personal property that could impact the value that you're able to assess on a home?
Well, I mean, I have seen it sometimes, you know, they'll include all the appliances in the kitchen. You know, they've got a stainless refrigerator, they've got one in the garage. You know, the stove is the stove and it's typically included in most sales. It doesn't really give any additional value. We don't take away from it. If somebody's paying a little extra for a house because they're going to keep that $3,000 refrigerator, you know, that might have a bearing on the price. It might not. I mean, typically they don't. Most of the time I see when agents list stuff and they include personal property, they've already considered that not part of the price. The one thing that is important to consider in the price is when the seller is providing repairs or maybe termite work. So let's say I get out to the property and it's obvious the property needs to have this work done in order to bring it up to maybe where the price is going to be. So we're going to want to know, is this going to be completed prior to the close so that way we don't have to say, okay, this is in inferior condition because it needs these repairs. We're going to know by the contract if these repairs are going to be completed.
Okay, very good. So to go even a step deeper into that, Colleen, if, you know, let me give you an example. So if, let's say somebody was selling a house and including all of the home furnishings into the house, okay? And we see that sometimes, especially in like vacation homes or if we're doing, you know, houses in Big Bear, Lake Arrowhead, things like that, which a lot of people do, especially now more than ever. People are looking for these vacation homes to sort of escape reality a little bit. So if a real estate agent were to put into a contract that, you know, all of the home furnishings are to convey with the purchase, however, at no value given, is that enough in a purchase contract to sort of exclude that element from your valuation where you can truly just say, okay, that's a gimme and doesn't have to be included in the value of the property?
Oh, absolutely. That's exactly how we would write it because we would have the contract and we would say property is selling for $500,000. The seller has included all personal belongings, and sometimes they do put an estimate on the value of it. They might say it's $20,000 or $10,000, and we just say it's excluded, no value was given. And as long as the property is valued at that price, there is no problem with that.
Okay, good. So I think that's a lesson to all of us listening out there, right? So if we're including things that are unconventional to normal, you know, if it's not bolted down to that property and conveyed as real property, you know, I think it's important that we designate that these things are being conveyed at no value, unless that's not the case, right? Unless on that particular deal, and then appraisers have the ability to factor that in as well. But keep in mind that these types of things can be considered on the lending side from an underwriter's perspective as an inducement to purchase when you're giving things of value to people. So I think that the overall sort of best practice here is to, especially for things like furniture, tractors, you know, whatever it's going to be, is to very specifically state in the contract that these items are being conveyed with no value. Okay, so I see it written both ways, and you know, oftentimes we're able to correct contracts because I think that's usually everybody's intent. But you know, as smart real estate practitioners, we should always try to head things like this off at the pass, because it's very difficult to unring a bell, and the bigger items we're talking about here are going to create questions in the appraiser's mind, in the processor's mind, the underwriter's mind. And again, we're putting, at a lot of times, we're putting 97% of the value down here. So at the end of the day, if we get sort of a bad inkling about something, we're going to win, right, at the end of the day. So it's better that we just sort of set that contract up appropriately at the beginning to avoid some of these things. So great. Okay, so you know, a little bit more into the actual appraisal process as a whole. So what are you really, and I implore you really to take your time and expand on this, because I think this is a big ticket item today. As far as what are you really looking at as items that can really influence value? Is it, you know, are things like location, busy streets, lot size, views, etc.? You know, what are the things that you're really looking at that can alter the price of a home and make it more than just a matter of cost per square foot?
Well, the most important thing, and in how most anybody, I would imagine real estate agents as well, when you look at a property, is when you're showing a buyer property, you're going to show them stuff that fits their needs or their wants. And typically that is what we look for. So we basically start out with looking for comparables that would be considered a replacement property to this property per the borrower's wants or needs. So I'm just going to use these different neighborhoods just as comparison. So let's say you have a buyer and they want to be in Morgan Hill or Red Hawk because they have kids that are going into high school and they want to be in Great Oak High School. Okay, they're not going to look at a property in Paseo del Sol or Crown Hill or Greenwich Hill or somewhere where their kids aren't going to be in that school district. So location is the most important thing that we have to remember. Are you there?
Okay, so let's dig into that, right? So you know, we all sort of, you know, I think that the real estate agent, the listing agent's job is probably more difficult today than it's been in a long time as far as properly evaluating properties, just because there's a lot of you know, sort of strange things going on as far as, you know, people just offering insanely over prices, and sometimes the appraiser comes in and sometimes the appraisal doesn't. But what I'm noticing is that real estate agents, some real estate agents, none of these Berkshire Hathaway agents, however, some real estate agents out there, however, are sort of going out further and further and further away from their subject property, sometimes into other cities, in order to sort of cherry pick properties to help substantiate their value. Can you talk a little bit about the selection of comps just from a location standpoint, and how you are sort of bound by certain processes on your own as far as what you can and cannot do?
Well, I mean, first of all, we do start by location. So if you just take a neighborhood that you're doing an appraisal in, and I'll just use Paseo del Sol, just because it's something I have been doing a lot of work in lately. So the first thing we're going to look in for a property that we're appraising in Paseo del Sol is Paseo del Sol. We're not going to look in any other neighborhood first. We're going to search the whole neighborhood. We're going to find the highs, the lows, what's selling, you know, what is selling. And obviously, you know, if we're doing a 2-story or a 1-story, those are different comparables. You know, we're going to look specifically in that area and see the group of information and comparables we have to work with. And from there, we're going to narrow it down. Now, what I see is something like what you're speaking of is when an agent then shows up and they have comps either, first of all, 6 months old or 3 miles away, and because they're just searching by price. And that's absolutely not the way we do it. We have to start with the location, because that's the most important thing. And then from there, obviously, if we don't have anything, usually we find this when we're doing a larger one story, especially in Temecula and Murrieta, is because they're more popular, they sell at a higher price, and they're not as many. So for that, we do expand the parameters, and we can do that. It just takes a little bit more explanation on why we're doing it. And that's acceptable. We're not gonna not use the property next door to go 2 miles away because it's sold for a higher price. We just can't.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, that sounds very intuitive, and it sounds very, logical. But that is certainly because obviously I'm on a very front line of dealing with appraisals, especially when they come in low. And,
Yes.
The immediate thing that I do is jump on the phone and talk to that listing agent to sort of determine the logic that was used in evaluating this property and wanting to see sort of a defensible set of comparables. And you'd be surprised if I'm having 10 of those conversations, 9 of them have nothing to say other than the market is hot right now, Dave, and everything is selling for over the value. And unfortunately, that's not something you can really put any teeth into, right? Like, unless somebody is saying, hey, Dave, look at the appraiser used comp 1, 2, and 3, but they skipped over, these other comparables here. That gives me some ammunition, right, to be able to come back and sort of negotiate through our AMC that process. So I think it's very, very important that we address this concept of cherry picking comps and the fact that, the tempo of the market in and of itself is not enough to raise the value of the property. It still has to be substantiated on recently closed comparables that are in close proximity and close in size and use of our subject property. Would that be a fair statement to make?
That is correct. That is correct. And, a lot of appraisers, I don't know, I can't speak for all of them. When the market was going down in 2007 and 2008, believe me, the lenders wanted us adjust down for the downward market. Now the market's going up, and I am not afraid to do it. I do it on almost all of my appraisals. If I'm using an older comp, we go back to the contract date. We don't go back to the close of escrow date, and I will make that adjustment upward. It could be, depending on what the market says, 0.5% a month, 1% a month, and that can make a difference on some of these properties, if you're making those adjustments. Because I'll tell you one thing, and I hate to do it, but when a property comes in under the sales price, the opinion of value is lower, it's probably 2 to 3 more hours work for me. I just assume we can bring it in because I have to search and research and find the comps and try to find what's going to work. Go back out there, shoot the photos. I mean, it's more work than it needs to be. We're all trying to make the deals work, but sometimes they just don't. There just isn't something out there.
Well, everybody, I want to tell you that what you just heard right now coming out of this lady's mouth is solid gold, because at the end of the day, we as practitioners of real estate can all sort of take out there our own sort of battle scars. And I'll tell you, I have even appraisers, even on my own panel, that don't share, this sort of what I believe to be very well-rounded, sort of grasp on what the market is doing. So, but just understand, and I think it's operative to look at that and know that these are human beings out there. So is it possible to get 2 different valuations from 2 different appraisers? Heck yes, it absolutely is possible, right? And, that's why we do our best, and our AMC does our best to equip us with the most capable individuals. I have worked with people in my 20-year tenure in the business that, don't share that same affinity here that Carlene has, where even though we're in an uprising market, they're very timid and there's a lot of trepidation in including that as a value element in that appraisal, and then reports just keep coming in low. So, but I think proper evaluation, proper selection of comps, and for you listing agents out there, having a real defined logic as to how you came up with that value is incredibly important. It is, again, not enough to just say the market is hot with fire emojis after that statement. That is not enough to bring the house in at value. But a little bit more into that. So we covered location. Sometimes what we see as well, though, Carlene, is we see a big complaint I get from from agents if we get low values is they say, but look at the comps that the appraiser used. Those houses are dumps, right? Look at our subject property. It's highly upgraded. So what kind of effect does the overall condition of the house have in the valuation?
The condition of the house has considerable amount of value to the property. You know, one thing I do tell agents when I meet with them, and I don't know if any of these agents have had this conversation from me, a lot of times agents, you know, they put their comments in the MLS, which is what we read as well. And, you know, this is a 10-star, this has got gold-plated faucets, you know, marble floors. But then when it closes all of a sudden and they sell the one next door, that one was a dump. So all of a sudden now it's not the same property that it was when they were trying to sell it. So, you know, the honest answer would be, you know, to honestly market the properties how they are. And, you know, we go through the MLS, we look at the photos, and hopefully there are photos in there. We call the agents. Was the solar paid for? You know, what type of cabinets were put in? You know, we try to ask the questions we can, but, you know, we don't always get the answers back. Sometimes they don't want to call us back. So, you know, we're kind of in the same boat. So we have to just go by what the MLS says. And if it says it's wonderful, then it's wonderful.
Okay, I'm going to actually, I'm going to pull a quick pivot here, and I'm going to ask Jennifer Wentz to come off of mute for a second and ask a follow-up question.
Thank you. I'm loving this discussion topic. And Carlene, you mentioned something, you know, that hit home with me during this situation that we're in right now in this market. You mentioned, you know, in 2007, you know, the banks were like, adjust low, because that's kind of where the market was at that time. Well, we're in the complete opposite market. So is there any adjustment for a little bit higher because of the lack of inventory, the desirability, people buy in a certain neighborhood, they don't want to move out unless they have to move out. So there's one home available only. There's not too many comps around it. Shouldn't we be able to adjust value upwards just a tad based off of our market?
Well, in the appraisal process, there's two values for each comparable. There's an unadjusted value at the top, which is the sales price, and there's an adjusted value at the bottom. The sales price, or actually the opinion of market value that's placed on the appraisal, has to be between the two. Has to be, you have to have a comparable on the appraisal that is at or above the price you're selling unadjusted, and then you have to adjust them down at the bottom. Now, what I would do in that situation, where I have these two files today, one of them is a little house at 400,000 that the highest comps are 380. Well, in that price range, there's not a whole lot of places to go at 400,000. I mean, there's not that much. I have another one that's 800,000. Well, at 800,000, you've got, you know, spectacular pools, and there's a lot more adjustments that can be made. So there's a little bit more leeway in the price. And because of the low inventory, we are able to go farther to find comparables. I mean, we do it, and I will do it. I don't have a problem doing it. But, you know, if we have, you know, 4 sales that have closed in the past 30 days, right in that same track, and they contracted 30 days before that, we really only have 1 month of lag time. So there's not going to be a big increase for the time adjustment. I mean, I'll make it. I make them up to 30 days in the contract price. So it really depends on where the property is located, but I'm not afraid to do it. And most appraisers shouldn't be. I have not had any come back.
So let me add to that, Jennifer, on top of that answer. So I think we've established here that, you know, Carlene is willing to sort of go hang 10 on that and stick her toes out over and adjust for market condition. But I do want to let everybody here know that the lender has the ultimate choice on whether or not to accept that appraisal or not. So although the work that Carlene does is you know, and her peers do, it's rarely questioned. I mean, we do depend on them as being the subject matter experts when it comes to valuation. However, with that said, every financial institution, depending on their appetite for risk and their sort of internal guidelines of you know, where are they willing to go, is going to look at that appraisal and they're going to say, no, I'm sorry, I don't buy that, Carlene. You gave an adjustment of value of 5% because of an aggressive marketplace that's not substantiated by recent closed comparables. We're going to reject that appraisal. You know, so it is not some end all be all answer out there. It is an absolute work in progress. And by the way, I'll tell you how this works at Fairway, right? Because that's all I can really speak for is my team. So when we get low appraisals in, I get the ability to counter that. And I do that by enlisting the help of my agents. And that usually, I don't like the extent of my argument to just be, hey, the market is moving up. It has to be, in my opinion, a combination of the market is moving up and then being able to provide evidence of that, not anecdotal evidence, right? Real evidence, like say, hey, look at the last two comps that have sold in recent time here, you know, that are pretty similar. That went up, you know, 4%, 5%, and they were only separated by 2 months apart from each other, right? That to me is showing a trend. It's not just enough to just say a trend. I think you have to prove a trend at the end of the day. But it's a good question, Jennifer. I would hold that close to the vest right now, though, because I think, again, and I say this only from experience, when I challenge appraisers and I go straight to the listing agent and I ask for the logic behind it, and when there is no answer to that, right? Or when I go to the buyer's agent and say, oh, it came in low, and I say, how did you develop your offer price? And the answer is just, well, we had to offer 20,000 over, Dave, otherwise our offer wouldn't be considered. That doesn't fundamentally change the value of the house, right? Because they had to do that. You know, so people also right now, what we're not seeing, what we don't always see in the MLS, is that houses can appraise for lower, and people are making the decision to pay more for that house above and beyond the appraised value of it, right? So if a house sold for 400,000 and it only appraised for 390,000, then they will set the loan based on that 390,000 value. And maybe the borrower just wrote a $10,000 check on top of that in order to not lose out on the house, right? Because a seller can sell their house for whatever they want. They don't have to sell it for what it's worth. They can sell it for whatever the hell they want to, as long as there's a buyer who's willing to pay for it. That doesn't necessarily change the value of the house because some buyer was willing to do something, right? The value of the house is established by recently closed comparables in close proximity to a similar like use of that particular subject property. I think there's a little bit of froth on top for markets going up and markets going down, but this $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 over, in my opinion, does not, just because that deal closed, one deal does not establish a new value in that neighborhood or a new community. Just because somebody with a lot of money freaked out and didn't want to go back on the market for another 6 months looking for a home and wrote a check for $30,000, right? That's not a true expression of value at the end of the day, because we would look at that, even if we had an appraiser who was really, really liberal in that way, the lender and the underwriter would look at that and say, we're not buying it, right? We don't want to be the lender who's loaning on the top of that mountain, right? We'd rather be the lender loaning on the way up, not the person standing on the top with the flagpole. That's not a good place to be when you're holding on to a 90% loan to value house, okay? So another quick question here, as far as condition of the property, permitted and unpermitted, and what that means to you as an appraiser. So the specific question was somebody who bought a house that had a carport, and they literally just put a garage door on their carport, and it wasn't permitted. Do things like that affect the value of the house?
No, not necessarily. Permitted or unpermitted is allowed to be used if it's unpermitted. You know, they typically want us to talk about the construction quality. We try not to do that too much because we're not contractors. You know, we are appraisers, but I mean, you can kind of give a little basic, you know, verbiage in there about the quality of it. I'm sure with the garage door, maybe that was Sun City. They took a carport and put a garage door on it. If the sides were enclosed, it would be considered a garage. I mean, that's what it is. And it doesn't matter if it's permitted or not permitted. We can use it. We just have to talk about it. And, you know, we want to know if we get out to a property and the tax rolls say 1,500 and now we have 2,000 square feet. Sometimes it's obvious, oh, they enclosed the garage. Well, now we don't have a garage. So now that's a whole other issue. So, but if they added 500 square feet or they closed the garage, added another garage, we're going to use it. I mean, if it's built in a good workmanlike manner, it's conditioned space. There's nothing wrong with using it. It doesn't have to be permitted. We just have to disclose it.
So workmanlike manner, I think that's the operative word in there,
Yes.
right? That's what we're looking for, certainly on the underwriting side. From the lender side, is we're looking for these things to be done in a workmanlike manner. And, you know, we're not relying on appraisers to, you know, furnish contractors' licenses to show that. But conversely, right, I had a property yesterday that an agent sent me and said, why are we having a problem with this? And literally somebody like bolted on a room addition and cut a hole, like with a saw, cut a hole between the existing house and this extra room that they added in the back. I mean, they didn't even bother to finish this hole that they cut. I mean, it is literally like sledgehammer hole. And, you know, they just couldn't get their arms around why we just won't evaluate this thing, right? So workmanlike manner, that's hugely important. Okay, one more question, actually two more questions, because I think this is super important. How should a listing agent, if they're walking through and listing a property, should they be, if they're looking and seeing things that they are seeing that in their opinion is a little bit beyond regular deferred maintenance, right? So maybe they're seeing some fundamental issues with the property, right? Like cracks where there probably shouldn't be cracks, or, you know, things that would make us, you know, question if it was at par with other properties. What's an appropriate adjustment to make, or is there an appropriate adjustment to make for condition of the property if it's better or worse? Are we talking in the 2 to 5% range, up or down, or is it just totally unique to the property?
Well, it's totally unique to the property and to the location. Some places, you know, different neighborhoods, you know, are going to pay more, are going to get more return. Properties that have, I mean, you're talking about cracks and stuff like that. I mean, you're going to be down probably in the C5 range, maybe C6 range. Well, that's going to require repair to be completed. So just without those kind of repairs, I mean, even an agent, you know, when they go through and do their inspection, and I think it's called an ABID, is that what it's called? The form that they fill out? When they do that and they're starting to mark down stuff like that, right away, they should have a flag in their head thinking, okay, this is going to be a problem when we go to sell it with a conventional buyer or FHA buyer, because these repairs are going to have to be completed for this property to go through. So those are major repairs. I mean, cosmetic repairs, carpet, paint, they're fine. They don't even have to have carpet. Some lenders will loan without carpet. They will. You know, they can be missing cabinet doors. Those are just minor condition property. They're just adjusted for. You know, now it's kind of hard to find properties that are in that condition, because most people, you know, we don't have the foreclosures in the market. We could always pull one of those in, you know, to use for properties that weren't in updated condition. But pretty much most things are, when I go in, I don't, you know, I'm not expecting to see any cracks in the slab. Hopefully if there was one in there, somebody would have already told me. But if I do see it, you know, then we are going to have an issue, because we are going to be at C5 or C6.
Okay, great. Yeah, so she mentioned, you know, C5, C6, that's an appraiser's rating of overall condition of the property. You know, we look at that as well. And because, you know, we, at some point, we as lenders don't want to put money on, you know, just sort of a bad bones, if you will, of a property, right? So we're going to be looking at that as well in our designation if we want a loan on the property. So there is another question here, and I think it's an important one about comp selection. So we talked about you know, cherry picking and how that's not a good thing to do. But what do we do if legitimately you know, there's just no real selection of comps? Like, let's say we're out in more of a rural type area where the comps are we don't have a KB home development of 400 homes to work with. How old is too old when it comes to comps, and how far is too far? I know that's a loaded question.
Really, neither of those. Too old is not too old. I mean, most of the time over 1 year, it starts to become too old because it goes through too many market cycles to go back and, to prepare the data. Rural areas, Anza, Wanga, I mean, we go 10, 15 miles when it's marked rural. And I mean, you have to drive all over the place out there. And you definitely have to go back a year, especially, I mean, out there, there's more manufactured than stick built. So we have to go back a little farther, and we have to expand the parameters. We typically try to stay within 20% plus or minus on the living area. Sometimes we have to go 40 or 50% out there because there isn't anything else. So when there isn't anything else, it's more work because we have to use these other sales. They're dated, they're bigger, they're smaller, and we just have to continue to add the comments.
Okay, got it. So I want to progress this interview forward because there's a couple of additional topics I want to make sure we hit. But I think that we need to circle back at the end of this and spend another 5 minutes at least and talk about the trend of the market and the effect on what it means for values today, what it's going to mean for in the next 3 months, and what it could mean if we start to see things sort of reverse from that. But I'm going to put a pause button on that particular topic, and we will circle back on that before we wrap up. So moving on, should a seller's or buyer's agent be present during the appraisal appointment? Is that a good thing, a bad thing? I guess it sort of matters who that individual is, but I'd like to hear the answer from your perspective.
That's kind of the same answer. There's some sure. I mean, some sure. I don't mind. I mean, I really don't. It doesn't. I mean, if they really want to be there, it's fine. We're really busy right now, so sometimes it doesn't fit in the schedule, and it's easier if I'm going to use my super key to just say I'm going to be there from 11 to 12 or 3 to 4, and if they can make it, they can. Obviously when they come to the appointments, and sometimes they'll bring the buyers, which probably isn't a good idea because then there's a lot of questions being asked, and it's not for us to discuss that with them. And so I have to politely tell them, and I hate to do that to an agent in front of their buyers, because I don't want them to look like they are saying something they shouldn't be saying, but it's just something we don't discuss in the field with the agents or the buyers. So I typically prefer, I guess I would say, for them not to be there. I guess when it gets all boiled down.
Okay.
That way I can just do my job. And, our job, this is something I do hear a lot from agents, and it's kind of disturbing when they say in front of the buyers, because the appraisal process at the property is short. It's some measuring and some photographs. I mean, we take about 100 photos of each property. So, we can see the crown molding, and I can see the granite, and I can see the flooring. And then when I go to leave, and this just happened yesterday, the buyer's agent in front of the buyer said to me, "Wow, that was fast. That doesn't take you very long." So the buyer's kind of looking like, "Whoa, what am I paying for?" And of course, then I have to reply, "Well, I still have 5 to 6 hours left on this file when I get back to the office." So when they say that to me, I think, oh, well, I really would appreciate it if you would say that. Kind of makes my time seem like I just was there for nothing. So that does kind of bother me.
That's a good answer. Yeah, I would say with absoluteness, buyers should not be present during this process. I tell all of my buyers, "Oh, Dave, do I need to be there for the appraiser?" Absolutely not. In fact, I recommend you're not there. The appraiser will not be able to comment to you. And that goes back to my earlier thing, that the appraiser's decision on value is not the end all be all, right? That appraisal report in and of itself has to be underwritten, has to go through a compliance review. And believe it or not, we disagree with appraisers all the time. And we get into a back and forth negotiation on that. And sometimes the value goes up and sometimes the value goes down. So we don't want to set any sort of expectation, nor should the buyer think they're going to get some sort of thumbs up on value present at that actual inspection. But I do want to talk about the agent's role a little bit more, because, I have some very good agents as well that I have found have been super integral in helping us achieve value. Especially for ones that are working with investors and things like that, that have the ability to provide invoices for recent repair work that has been done, and comp selections and things like that. So if we don't really want the agents there, potentially, when is the appropriate time for the agent, and is that something that you welcome to provide you with any sort of intel or research on the property that may help you with this stuff, as far as comp selection that they use, again, the logic question, right? What logic they had in evaluating the property. And certainly with things that have been recently rehabbed, being able to provide sort of a laundry list of all the things that were done in that time. Is that information helpful to you, and when's the best time to receive that?
The information is very helpful to me, and I definitely appreciate it. And typically what I would say is when the appointment is made, I always will say, because I normally will say to an agent, if I have a problem with this appraisal, or if there's going to be an issue, you know, I'll ask you, what do you have for data? But I would prefer to get it up front because, you know, we are human, and, you know, we use the same MLS, but let's face it, sometimes listings are put in there, they're not accurately marked, you could miss one. So I like them to provide me, let me see what you have, because it might be something different from what I have, and I might be able to use it. So I say, provide me all the data you can. If you have a list of the improvements they made, when they made them, how much they spent, most of them have that and they have it written down. Sure, email it to me. I'd gladly take it.
Great. I love that, you know, and, you know, I think that it goes on to our side as well. You know, when we have difficult underwriting situations on a file, right, we don't want to just submit away and let an underwriter, in this case, an appraiser, make up their own determination, right? The more that we can provide to show the logic of something up front, I think we always, as individuals, should be trying to make the process easier for anybody. And now I do want to say that, you know, we're talking to one appraiser. Carlene here is clearly open-minded and wants to work. Sometimes we have grouchy, crotchety people as well on the appraisal side, just like we do with underwriting, just like we do with listing agents, and just like we do with buyers and sellers out there. So these are all just human beings at the end of the day. I think as agents, as real estate practitioners, we should always offer, we should always come prepared, we should always be willing to defend our logic beyond sort of anecdotal statements like the market is hot, right? And you know, so I would always offer that stuff up. So agents, be prepared when you're going to get that call to schedule the appointment. Be prepared to offer that information up. And Carlene, you have something to add?
One thing I do want to say is, and one of the reasons why I like to get it up front, and I have had, I have had in the past 3 months, I think 2 properties come back for reconsideration of value. One I did not increase, one I did increase because I did miss a comparable. But one thing I want to say is providing all that data up front and to see what the agents actually were using, because when we send in that report, to be honest with you, I don't want to see it again. And when it comes back as a reconsideration of value, that's another hour or 2 now I have to spend on a property and an appraisal report that I'm not going to get paid any more money for that. So I'd rather send it in one time with the best data I can and just move on down the road. So
one and done. I love that. One and done. I love that. Love that. Jennifer Went says, can we request you on all of our appraisals, please? I wish it were that simple, but yeah, no, this is Jennifer. This is why I asked Carlene to be a part of this, because this is the real stuff. Okay, so all right, so we're gonna well, you kind of hit on that, so we'll just expand on it. You talked about a couple of situations here recently where you've had a reconsideration of value. So let's maybe this is something you and I tackle together, Carlene. Let's talk about what that process looks like should the value not come in where it needs to be. So I'll let you take it from your end, and then I'll chime in when it gets to my part.
Well, when they come over, now it used to be they had to have 3 additional comparables. I don't think that's the situation now. I think what'll happen is if an appraisal comes back for reconsideration of value, if there's one particular property that the agent says, hey, why didn't we use this property? They'll send it in, which of course goes through the management company, which had probably come from you or your office. And then they send it to myself or the appraiser and say, hey, the agent has provided this comparable. Is it possible for you to review this and see if it's relevant to the property and if we can use it and will it increase the value or not? So, you know, then we go back, we look at the property and hopefully it's a better one. I mean, if it is, great. We put it on the grid, we make the same adjustments. We say, okay, this property is now on the grid, it doesn't change the value. But then we just make the comment of yes or no, was this viable to increase it? If it didn't, why it didn't, and then we send it back. But you know, that's all just time.
Okay. So let me add to that. So when we receive an appraised value that is not, of course, doesn't meet value, it comes to us and it gives me an opportunity to evaluate that. And then, like I've mentioned a few times, I immediately reach out to both agents, and I want to start having conversation about logic and comparables and, you know, blaring omissions. Now, I'm pretty darn good at reading appraisals. I would not say that that is a specialty that many loan officers have. Unfortunately, a lot of loan officers just operate anecdotally as well. And, you know, it should be there. The value, the market's hot, right? You know, same kind of thing. So what I like to do is I like to get, you know, the agents on the phone, and we'll do a Zoom. I'll share the appraisal, and we'll literally go through and I'll walk them through sort of the appraiser's logic, because it's all written right there in the adjustment of at least the mindset of the appraiser. And I do that not to throw the appraiser under the bus or help or hurt. It's just to create conversation so that the Jennifer Wentz's of the world can say, wait, whoa, stop. That's not what is there. This other comp over here was not reflective of that, or it, you know, they said that the rating of that was lower. Dave, let me show you these pictures. The pictures they're using that they looked at were prior to the rehab, before that house was sold, right? It's just designed to get conversation going. But here's the one thing that I want you guys to know. Your pathway towards being successful in an appraisal renegotiation is through the lender, not directly through the appraiser. Okay, I had a situation just literally 2 weeks ago here at Fairway where we had a real bad appraisal come in. I thought it was bad. And I reached out to the agents and I said, look, get me this data, and it was a tough one. It was a manufactured home. It was kind of out yonder, and they were trying to use the logic of the listing agent in Anza was to use a Temecula comps, which, like, what are you talking about? Like, you just hop, skipped, and jumped over 4 comps that we should be using. So I didn't agree with the listing agent, but I didn't agree also with the appraiser, and I thought there was sort of a healthy medium right in the middle, which it turns out there was. But instead of working with me on it, that listing agent took it upon themselves to go and start having a fight with this appraiser and sending emails and blowing them up and sending them comps and this and that. As soon as I finally nailed this individual down and said, get me this data you're sending to the appraiser, I was able to go through my AMC, and my AMC sent that information to the appraiser. And what do you know? We got action immediately. Now, in this particular case, the action wasn't good. The appraiser dug their heels in and said they actually made some of the adjustments and the fundamental errors that we pointed out of their comp adjustments, like literally instead of pluses using minuses. And I mean, like, they were just literally errors in the appraisal. It wasn't subjective, it was just errors. And but even making those adjustments, the appraiser refused to change the value. Now at Fairway, thankfully, I can't speak for other lenders, but I can speak for you with what I'm able to do here. I sent a request to our compliance department to fault that appraisal report. And we did. I was able to sort of present my case to our staff head appraiser that we have within Fairway, which we do. We have multiple appraisers within Fairway, right, that are here as collateral reviewers to look at what we're doing. I got the FLS, our AMC, to sort of agree with me, at least vaguely. And Fairway allowed me to fault the appraisal, in which case it opened up the door for us to be able to order an additional appraisal. The buyer didn't have to pay for it. We took the cost of it. And lo and behold, the new appraisal came in and we landed right in the middle, right where we thought it should land, where the comps actually supported. So point of the story there is you're not really doing yourself any favor by picking fights with appraisers out there. Let's take the emotional component out of this. Let's sink our teeth into real logic, right? Comps, MLS numbers, properties, pictures, things that we can really substantiate, right? and allow the lender to work through their internal processes in order to get that done. Now, if they're a lender that doesn't have a lot of clout in that space, change lenders. I mean, I don't know what to tell you, but but I will tell you that the way to speak with these people is intelligently, it's data-based, and it's really through their proper channels of working with their AMC, because no appraiser wants to feel like they got a gun to their head. And with the new rules of engagement after 2008, they don't have to. And that's a good thing. That was good for our market place to kind of create this distance, this arm's length between loan officers and appraisers at the end of the day. When I didn't just call Carlene up and say, hey girl, can you jump on here? I went to my AMC, right? And I said, I would like to have Carlene participate in this Q&A session with a real estate company. And I let them say, okay, Dave, thumbs up, right? Because we have to be, the last thing I ever want anybody to accuse me of is that me and Carlene are like this, and she's out there doing appraisals to meet my specific needs out here. So it just shows you how important it is to go through proper channels, okay?
I didn't even know what you looked like till today.
Yeah, exactly. Likewise. So all I know is that I love your appraisals. So that's all.
One thing I want to just make a quick comment is when you talk about the AMCs is, it is really busy times right now, and I work for several AMCs, some not as often as others, but I would say I probably get 10 requests for appraisals a day that are bids, and these management companies send them out and they want you to bid the price and the turn time. Well, I guarantee you, whoever is doing those appraisals is doing them for such a low fee, and they're turn and burn. So that's probably creates some problems when you're getting some of these lower appraisals. Probably not for your company. Your company doesn't do that. So other companies do, and then they're sending these out of area appraisers, and they're half of them, I'm not sure if they're even licensed, they're trainees. They go out, and then 2 months later you have this appraisal that's done for $300, and they're wondering why it's so bad. So sometimes that is a problem, and I think it's probably a problem right now when I consider the amount of requests for bids that I get. I just delete the emails. I don't have time for that. So, but I'm just saying those are out there.
Yep, absolutely. Listen, so I'm looking at time, and I know we said that we may go like 10 minutes or so. So we don't have to wrap up right this moment, but I want to sort of put us in the 2-minute warning here. But there's a question out there as far as how long do appraisals last, and do they stick to the property and things like that. That's probably more of an appropriate answer for me to give, because it's really sort of loan guideline related versus appraiser related, right? So we'll just kind of talk. We'll start with conventional loans, right? So conventional loans, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, they don't stick on the property at all. In fact, as you can see, I just told you about a situation where I was able to fault an appraisal on that property real time and immediately order another appraisal for a conventional property right away. So there is no scar tissue, right? If that appraisal comes in low and a month later that there's a new buyer on that house and they're getting a conventional loan, that lender wouldn't even be aware that an appraisal was performed prior to, unless we were made aware for some reason, right? So we will always order our new appraisal. Now, it's a little bit different when we're talking about FHA and VA. So FHA, if the lender did it right, which they don't always do it right, but if the lender did it right, they're going to log that appraisal upon receipt into the FHA Connection, which is sort of a national database out there that tracks lots of stuff, case number, assignments, whether appraisals have been done or not. So, and that's stuck in the system for 120 days. So if Jen Wentz was to bring a deal to my desk here and it was an FHA borrower, and we go into contract, whether Jen knew that there was a prior appraisal done on it or not, when we go in order to order an FHA appraisal, we have to pull a case number, which means we have to run this query through the FHA Connection. And if there is an appraisal logged on there, it's an immediate stop. It's called the holds tracking, where we literally cannot order a new FHA appraisal if there is a report within that 120-day period that's in there. And this can create problems, right? Especially when you're in a market that is going up, 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 and up. Because the only way for us to be able to order an appraisal, an FHA appraisal on a property that already has an FHA appraisal on it, is for our local Hawk Center, right, which happens to be in Santa Ana for us out here, to actually, we have to submit to them where they fault the appraisal and open it up and allow us a clear case number for us to order a new appraisal. And by the way, you and I, trust me, don't have time for this. That's not going to happen in our appraisal contingency period. So that creates a real issue, right? So if you're a listing agent and you have a low ball appraisal that's done on an FHA loan, and you actually cancel contract because you couldn't find a happy medium of renegotiating this, you better be very skeptical on accepting another FHA loan transaction at a price that is above that appraised value as well, because you're going to be stuck with the same exact thing. Okay. Now, VA, there's a big misconception. A lot of people think VA works the same way as FHA. They do not. VA does not maintain a central depository for previously done appraisals. So if a VA appraisal came in low last week and Shannon brought me a new VA offer on her listing today, we would order a new VA appraisal and it would get done. Keep in mind, the VA appraisals is the one exception to using my AMC and my list of appraisal panelists. So VA loans are assigned by the VA in and of itself. So we order those appraisals directly through the VA portal, and the VA will reach out and assign it to the appropriate appraiser. So don't shoot the messenger, right? You got a problem, call the president. And but there is no depository. So if you have a low appraisal, we can get another VA appraisal. Okay. Yes, it's 120 days on the appraisal, 4 months. Okay, for that FHA appraisal. Now, the VA appraisal, by the way, can be changed from lender to lender as long as it's the same buyer on the same property. So if PRMG started the VA loan and then they, for some reason, denied the loan, and then, Joe McGowan called me and I say, hey, to hell with that, Joe, I can approve this loan, right? Our guidelines are way more liberal on VA or whatever. I can have that VA appraiser transferred over to us and we can use it to fund the loan without having to order a new one. We can do that now with conventional loans as well. That's something that kind of came to the world here about 1.5 years ago for us. But we're looking for certain things, and I won't bore you with, but there's certain designations of confidence of values and stuff from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. We have to meet certain numbers before Fairway will allow us to bring that appraisal in. And on an FHA appraisal, we have to use it, right? We have no choice. So we have to get it. Okay, cool. I think now, I'm looking at the chat box here. I think for our next few minutes here, Carlene, I'd like to go back to the topic of this hot market, because that's really what this is all about. And I think that's what's tripping a lot of us up out there. And I don't even, a lot of very experienced real estate agents as well are having trouble with valuations right now, because there's a market demand out there that is not necessarily consistent with market values out there. And we're all sort of struggling with this right now. So let's talk about this a little bit more. So you already talked about you as an individual factoring in an increasing market into your valuation, and the fact that you're willing to kind of, make some adjustments based on that. But how long do we really need to be in this type of market where we're setting new precedents? I gave you that example, right, of this one borrower who paid $30,000 over the appraisal, how that doesn't really set the value of the property. But if one borrower does that, and then another borrower does that, and then another borrower does that, yeah, at what point does it actually change the value of the property? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, then you've set a trend. I mean, you usually need about 90 days to see a trend in the market, which now we are having stuff closing. I mean, now I know 90 days ago stuff was a little bit lower, but it was much higher than it was in the spring, because the spring market we had was, you know, we weren't doing much of anything. So we kind of moved our spring market into the summer, and then it just went gangbusters. So when this first started a couple of months ago, we really didn't have any data to support the increase. We just didn't have it. We just can't say, yeah, the market's really moving up, the demand is high, the supply is low. I mean, it takes about 90 days for that to show up in the data. It does show up now. We do add a form to the appraisals. I know your company doesn't require it on the Fannie Mae appraisals, but I still complete the form, and that's the 1004 MC, which is a market conditions form. It takes the parameters that we use for searching, and that's going to be the location first, and we search by map on the MLS, and then we put in our data. We want to search for our comps, a square footage range, maybe an age range, maybe 1 level, 2 level. We come up with the data we want to use, and then we put that through, and it prints it out on our form. And now you can clearly see an increase. It's 90 days, 90 days, and then the first box is the 120, is the 6 months, 180 days. So, but you can clearly see an increase, and it's a percentage. I mean, you can clearly apply that now to the comparables, and that's what should be done. And every appraiser should be doing it, because in any market that's increasing, now there could be some sub-markets that aren't. You know, there are some that are a little bit, you know, farther behind, but most markets are increasing, and these appraisers should be applying that. The data is there now. It takes about 90 days though for it to show up. So we are finally seeing it, because you said the one comp does not make the data, but when that one closes, now that becomes a new closed sale at 400, because that's what it closed at. Even if the buyer paid the 10,000 over, it becomes a comp at 400,000 that we're going to use. But one comp isn't enough. We need to show the trend. You know, maybe we have a few pendings that are pending higher, and you know, we can weight those. We can't weight them as a closed sale, but we can support the upper range of the market using the pending sales, and that's what should be done. It's not, I don't know what other appraisers do, because that's really what the market is. So that's what we should be doing.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you entirely, and I think, you know, to pull some little gold nuggets out of what you just said, right? So 90 days, it's sort of like, think of it like a lagging indicator, right?
Yes,
so,
it is lagging.
So you as listing agents really need to be looking at that 90-day period and really focusing on what has happened. And look, I don't want to just beat up appraisers right now. The world has completely changed in the last 90 days. So, you know, it's easy on our end to be able to point and say, oh, what a crappy appraisal, everything's going up, up, and up. But, you know, they're in a database, she uses the word herself, but, you know, we're in a database business here. And so if we don't have data to support things, they become anecdotal statements, and you can't really dig your teeth into that. So I think that, again, really, really dissecting the trend. But I'm happy to say that it seems that literally even in the last 2 or 3 weeks, we've had less issues with lower appraisals than we did, say, 6 weeks ago.
There's more
right?
data.
Because there's more data. There's more data now to work off of. So we can all kind of kick and scream 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, but at that point, there just wasn't enough data established to support these trends. And, you know, understand these trends, and I'm going to say something kind of controversial, and before I have 80 real estate agents throw tomatoes at me, I'm going to say, look, you guys, I'm an eternal optimist, right? I've been in this business for 20 years. So very uniquely, I mean, I think a great deal of our real estate population out there has all been post 2008. So we know one thing: up, 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 up,
Yeah.
up, right? Well, I've been here since 2002. So I know down, up, 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 down, 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 up, 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 up. I've been around the block here. So I tend to be an optimist because I always bet on real estate, personally, even on my own life. However, with that said, at the end of the day, you know, it's important to, it's just important to acknowledge these trends, and we as lenders, right, we what's happening out there in this quote unquote hot market is being fueled by a lot of things. And it's not being fueled by a healthy economy, right?
No.
We have our normal indexes are completely inverted right now, what we look at, right? Prices are not up because the economy is banging, right? Now, the stock market is recovered, but unemployment is thrashed. We are absolutely, from a gross domestic, we are in a recession. We will continue to be in a recession. And there's a lot of question marks as to what first quarter next year is going to look at. They're talking about a further evaporation in the mid-level management job sector as companies have gone remote and are doing meetings like we're having here today. So I think that, you know, the reason interest rates are so low is based on a lot of bad news, not a lot of good news.
Yes.
Now, the ramification of it is a healthy market, and I'm glad to see that. But when we go out there and say the market is hot, I just read a statistic yesterday. Joe, you could probably comment on this better than I can. But it said year over year, we have about 41% less inventory on the market than we should have right now. So this is just the law of simple supply and demand, right? But then we have to ask ourselves, this is what lenders are saying, right? Why do we have 40% lower inventory, right? Is it because of COVID and people are still freaked out about having people walking around in their living room and they're worried about their job, so they're not selling their house because they don't want to get into a replacement house that they can't afford? Are they on forbearance right now, which means they can't get another loan? There's a lot of things happening. So you can't just say the market is hot because things are selling for more than what they're being listed for. A lot of that is predicated on fear of the marketplace, right? And people really wanting to secure that 2.nothing% interest rate, because if you get a 2.625% 30-year fixed interest rate, you have effectively beaten history, right? You're getting a loan at the lowest that rates have ever been. So even if property values corrected 10%, but if interest rates went back up to where they were even in January of this year, I'm not saying, oh, if interest rates go up to where they were 20 years ago, I'm talking about if interest rates go up to where they were 7 months ago, you will pay more for that house at 10% below where it's at today than buying it today at 10% higher at a 2.65% interest rate, right? So a lot of people, I think, know this. A lot of that's spurring people to make a lot of decisions that are a little bit off the reservation, right? But we as lenders, right, we're still sort of licking our wounds from 2008 when we got left with a lot of collateral. And trust me, when we as lenders do not want to own real estate, we do not want to foreclose on homes. We lose our ass when that happens, to put it bluntly, right? Because those people stay in the property for a year and a half, they destroy it on the way out. We have to repair it. We have to go hire Jennifer Wentz and pay her 6% to go fix this property up and go and sell it. At the end of the day, we lose, right? We are not these big bad bankers saying, ha ha ha, we got the property back, right? No, we don't want the property. We're not in the business of owning real estate. We're in the business of selling money, right? So it's incredibly intrusive to the dynamic of how we run our business when we all of a sudden become asset managers, right? That's why the process is so damn clunky to sell REO properties, because we suck at it. We're terrible at it. It's inefficient. We got to hire all sorts of new departments and asset managers and BPOs and all these things that come into there. So we don't want properties, but you have to understand that the lending institution, and it's always at odds with the real estate community out there from like a soldier standpoint, right? Because you guys are front lines. It's your job to be very emotional and inspire people to buy. I get it, right? But at the same time, you have to understand why we don't necessarily share that optimism, right? Because what's happening right now, we just don't know how real it is. And that's a fair statement to make. It's predicated on a pandemic, right? So what happens post this pandemic is really the question. And you can get 10 Harvard economists one day to say one thing and 10 other economists the next day to say something completely contrary to it. And they all graduated with Harvard degrees, right? So it's like, what's going to happen at the end of the day? The truth of the matter is we don't know. Now, is real estate still a solid bet? I believe it is, because here's my reasoning behind this. When you look at 2008 versus now, you know, you're looking at a market in 2008 that was fueled, the big run up was fueled by a lot of irresponsible lending, right? A lot of subprime lending, interest-only lending, negative amortization lending, where you're actually paying less than the interest, and your balance is going up every single month. Countrywide fast and easy loans and no income, no asset loans. We had loans for people that had a bankruptcy discharge yesterday for 100% financing the day before the world blew up, right? So what you had was a lot of people that really weren't substantiated owners to begin with. Then fast forward from 2009 up to 2020, where we're at right now. In my opinion, certainly within my 20-year tenure, this is the healthiest rising of home values that we've ever had, because it's predicated, arguably, especially the foundation piece, right? Say from 2010 to 2014, that period is arguably the hardest time in modern history to obtain a loan, right? Full documentation only. Explain this to me. Show me the pay stub. Show me the W-2. Why did this go down 4%? I need a cheek swab to check your DNA. I mean, we put people through the ringer to get homes. And by the way, they got 30-year fixed loans because adjustable rate loans have been pretty much non-existent, right? And everybody's interest rate starts with either a 4, a 3, and now a 2. So what it comes down to at the end of the day is that when values flatten or recede, which they will, it's not a question of if, it's when, right? When that happens, what is going to be the motivation of that homeowner, right? They're locked into a 30-year fix. The only way they're not going to be able to afford their house payment is if somebody dies or they lose their job or have a mental breakdown or something like that. Otherwise, we've already proven that they can make this mortgage payment, and most people's income doesn't go down, it goes up historically, right? So will there be problems on the horizon? Potentially. Will there be more REOs? Potentially. But are we going to see this mass exodus? I bought my house in 2010. You would have to come to my house and pry that house out of my cold, dead fingers before I let that go back to the bank. And I think there's a lot of people out there just like me that bought homes between then and now that aren't going anywhere, which I think is a great, great thing for our marketplace. But I think as a rhetoric, we got to be very careful of how we go out there and describe the market. It is hot, and I agree that inventory is moving and it's moving quick. But we have to understand why the lending community and why looking through our lens is a little bit different than looking through yours, because we just don't want to be stuck with a bunch of upside down properties that we have to foreclose on and end up taking a loss when we sell them. So that is the reasoning why we don't necessarily jump on the bandwagon of market trend, right? Because this is not necessarily a real market trend. It's a market trend that is 100% related to a worldwide pandemic. So I hope that was at least a fair comment for me to say. I'm looking at the chat box. Joe, if there's any other additional questions, now is the time to ask it. I know this was recorded for those people that couldn't make it, but before I wrap up, I just wanted to thank Carlene again for her time to join us today. You're so wonderful. I love that you sit on top of my panel. And Jen Wentz, you better believe that I get as many appraisals to this lady as I possibly can while staying within my guidelines, of course. So Joe, do you have any questions or?
No, awesome. No, we ran a little bit over, but I really appreciate everybody's participation today. We had over 100 people on board. That was tremendous turnout. So thank you all for that. We do want to call the meeting. I know a few people have had to drop off already, but we wanted to be respectful of time, and so real content has been covered. But we also want to make sure that we cover any questions that you still have, and there may be a few more in the chat box. So if anyone wants to hang on for a few more minutes, you're welcome to do so. But we are going to go ahead and call the meeting now. Would love to get some feedback from people that had further questions. We can still handle them offline after the fact. We don't want to leave anyone without an answer to your question. So if you've got something, please get it to your manager, and we'll get you an answer. But please be happy to stick around. This is a subject I think that Dave and I both are very, very passionate about, and we've been through a very hot market that was artificially inflated back in the mid 2000s with outside influencers like Stonewood and Best Construction that really did a lot of damage to the community, did a lot of damage to homeowners, and these overinflated prices, and it drove prices up. People got into homes that really weren't valued where they were. And so we're really sensitive to what's going on now, that this is a market influence that is strictly based on constraint of inventory. And if that changes, now this year is a combination of a multitude of things. It's a big funnel of the election year and COVID and everything else. So I think this is the first time any one of us have seen inventory at less than 2 months worth of availability. Sorry, 2 months, 2 weeks. I'm sorry, less than a half a month of inventory is our market right now. It's not 2 months, it's 2 weeks. So
crazy.
Very, very short inventory. But anyway, going to wrap it up. Thank you, everybody, for being here. You're welcome to leave. If you've got some other questions, throw them in the chat. Shannon, I'd be open to going ahead and unmuting people if they want to just chat a little bit here for just a couple more minutes. We want to wrap it up within the next 5 to 10 minutes max.
I'm going to keep recording just for the sake of these might be some good questions that come up on board, and
that would be great.
Everybody should be able to
unmute in fact. Hey, Joe, in fact, and Shannon, I'd like to actually address the question there about how does an appraisal get waived?
Yeah, good question.
Because that's a huge question, and we're getting that all day long, and that's really more of an appropriate question for me versus Carlene anyway. So, and by the way, Carlene, we know you're super busy, so if you have to drop off, girl, again, appreciate you very much. I'm happy to stick around, Joe, and field some of these questions. I feel like I'm in an appropriate position to do that. So let's talk about appraisal waivers. So right now we are seeing, it's called a PIW or a collateral waiver, depending on the transaction. So this only happens in the world of conventional financing, not FHA or VA, right? So it has to be Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have an internal automated valuation model built into what we call a desktop underwriter or loan prospector, DU or LP. You guys know what this is because you ask for it all the time. Let me have a copy of the DU. And that's essentially the computer's, Fannie Mae's proprietary automated underwriting engine's evaluation on somebody's credit worthiness, right? But it also has a component in that system where it's actually valuating the property in and of itself. So there are certain situations, and it's not like a if you do X, then Y will happen. It's sort of an integrative approach. But if Fannie Mae through that desktop underwriting or Freddie Mac through their desktop underwriting feel that the value is well substantiated, and they're an AVM, for you guys who don't know, is an automated valuation model. So it's basically just like a computer's access to data, right? Where it's going to pull comps. It uses algorithms and things like that. If that looks good to the system, and we have a borrower that looks good. Now, what do I mean by a borrower who looks good? A good credit profile, a good debt to income ratio profile, a good asset reserve profile, things like that, then the computer may make the determination that an appraisal is not needed because it's evaluated all aspects of the transaction, and it says this pretty much has no risk to it. So it's literally a finding that pops up in the DU or the LP. However, keep in mind that that finding does not pop up until after the transaction is already in escrow. When we're running DUs as what we call a TBD or to be determined because we don't yet have a subject property, you won't see that finding there ever. It's not going to waive an appraisal without knowing what property. So if you're evaluating DUs as part of your doing a good job as a listing agent, or you're having your preferred lender, which we love to do for our agents, to help sort of siphon through some of these crazy offers out there to make sure that these borrowers legitimately can pull this off, we won't see that finding. So we won't know if there's an appraisal waiver until after we contractually enter an escrow and the lender reruns that DU with the actual subject property in the system. And then that will activate that AVM model to turn on. And then if it feels like it's a reasonable value, and I've been told that there's like a 10% variance. So even if it likes if it feels the property is worth 500,000 and it's being sold for 530, we can get an appraisal waiver on that because it's within the tolerance depending on the customer. Now keep in mind, we have to send a special document to the customer that says, hey, Miss Roundsley, you received an appraisal waiver on this property. Please sign this and tell us whether or not you want to accept this appraisal waiver or you want us to order an appraisal, because you have every right to pay for and obtain an appraisal if you want to. Now, most people will waive it because it saves them, $550. But some people, there's a strategy out there that a lot of buyer's agents are using where they're purposely going above the price, knowing that it's not going to appraise. And then the way they look at it is that that's just a starting point for negotiation, right? To renegotiate the file. So if you have an appraisal waiver, it sort of takes the wind out of your sail of being able to do that. You're going to be stuck with whatever value you put on that purchase contract. But an appraisal waiver, it's not for everybody. It depends on the overall strength of the file, which looks at a lot of different aspects, but it's determined through that automated underwriting process. And then it's either accepted or rejected by the borrower themselves. So that's the deal on that. Let's see here. Fed's going to make a big announcement tomorrow. Yeah, they're going to push for inflation. It's not that they're going to push for inflation. It's that inflation is happening. Anytime you throw a couple $1 trillion onto the street out there, it's going to devalue, those printing presses are moving faster than ever. So it's not that the Fed is going to try and create inflation. The Fed is going to try to make a move to stem inflation. And that's an important thing, right? Because interest rates are going to go up. There's no question about it. We don't want to see things go like this, though. We would rather stagger it and have it go at a linear model versus like some sort of crazy movement up. So yeah, the Fed's going to make some announcements. I wouldn't worry too much anything pre-election. No matter what the Fed does as far as increasing interest rates, unemployment will be the ultimate economy driving mechanism here moving forward. It's going to be all about jobs. It's going to be jobs, 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 jobs. And so that's really the better indicator as what's going to go on. So take what the Fed says as a grain of salt. We might see like an immediate reaction, and then usually there's a trail back. So there was big news yesterday. Many of you guys may have heard that about 3 weeks ago, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac increased the cost of refinances across the board. They added a half a point assessment onto every single refinance, conventional refinance, and they gave lenders no turnaround time with it. It basically said, essentially starting tomorrow, well, it wasn't really tomorrow, it was September 1st, but understand that any lock we took in August is going to close in September. So when we delivered them to them, we as lenders were going to pay a half a point fee. I'll give you some perspective. At Fairway, that would have cost us close to about $20 million overnight. So everyone with pitchforks and torches in hand went to the FHFA, and many real estate practitioners and real estate agents helped us with that cause as well by going in and electronically submitting a complaint to your local representative. Well, FHFA announced yesterday that they are stemming that. It will go into effect, but not until December. Which gives us a little bit more runway here, which is also good because, we've got a lot of people that can get out of forbearance and refinance their house into lower interest rates, which will just further ensure that people have the opportunity to take advantage of these low rates and secure themselves so that they don't have to let their house go. And that's, party to what we were talking about earlier about what the future foreclosure market looks like. Hey, are you, Carlene, are you still on with us?
Now it looks like she jumped off a little bit ago, Dave.
Okay, so I'm going to answer the question here. How much value does the appraiser give for a pool? Do they take into account, all the hardscape associated with it? Again, so there's a term out there in real estate that we use. It's called economic obsolescence, right? Or that means over improvement. So this is where we get into a situation where somebody says, but Dave, they spent $50,000 on that bathroom remodel. Well, that was stupid, right? I mean, hey, great if you're going to live in your house and you want to pee in gold toilets, but at the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily increase the house $50,000, right? So the question to the pool and to the hardscaping ultimately is related to the comparables in the area. So if the comparables out there also have pools and significant hardscaping out there, then it's not likely going to increase the value of the house at all. Now, the general let's talk about houses between 350 and 550. So conventional window in there for a pool or no pool is about $25,000. Okay, the expanded hardscaping is very circumstantial because it's very opinion based, right? I mean, you have some people who will go in there and break up all that hardscaping because they want more grass back there, right? So just because to somebody that meant something to them doesn't necessarily mean it will translate, and certainly not dollar for dollar. So I think pools are generally anywhere from about a $25,000 to $35,000 adjustment across the board. I've never really seen it less than that, but I've rarely seen it more than that, right? And, oh, but Dave, this is like a resort style Las Vegas pool. Okay, it's economic obsolescence. They over improved that property. That does not change the value of the property. That's just going to take somebody who has a big suitcase full of money that's willing to pay over the appraised value of the house because they want that resort style pool, right? So hopefully that's a good answer to that. I'm just scrolling through here on the chat box, Joe, to make sure, managers or anybody else, if you want to come off of mute and introduce any questions, or if you saw that I missed something, go for it.
I think I think this was a great presentation and covered just about everything. I was scrolling through the chat here a minute ago. I don't see anything at all that we've missed. So again, we may get some follow-up questions from this directly to the managers. We'll get them back to you, Dave, and maybe you can still get them, Carlene, and get some feedback on these for our office meetings for next week. But this has been fantastic.
Absolutely.
Thank you for everybody. We did go over, but we wanted to make sure we got everyone's questions answered. But thank you so much, Dave, and